Have you ever felt the sharp sting of being overlooked, the quiet humiliation of your value dismissed, your efforts unnoticed while others, less capable, are lauded as if the world itself conspires to mock your existence? Ask yourself this: what is it that truly commands respect? Is it kindness, generosity, charm, or the warmth you offer to those around you? Or is it something far darker, more primal, a force that does not bend to sentiment, that does not falter under the gaze of fools, that does not seek approval but demands it silently, inexorably, like the chill wind that sweeps through an empty hall and leaves all who remain trembling in its wake? Respect is rarely given to the soft-hearted. It is carved from the iron of indifference, forged in the furnace of detachment, and wielded with deliberate precision by those who understand that human hearts, in their vulnerability, are easily manipulated by cold calculation. Consider the countless men and women who plead, persuade, and perform, thinking warmth will shield them from contempt. How often have you witnessed a brilliant mind, overflowing with insight and potential, reduced to a background note in the theater of human folly because it shone too brightly for those who cannot bear light? And yet, observe the one who retreats, who withdraws, who cloaks their intentions in silence, letting others rush past them, thinking themselves superior, only to realize later that the one they ignored was the very architect of influence they failed to perceive. This is the paradox of respect. It rarely arrives through overt display, through affection or compromise. It emerges when one becomes cold, when one learns that detachment is not cruelty but strategy, and that the world bows only to those who refuse to kneel themselves. To become cold is not a surrender to bitterness or hate. It is a conscious act of clarity, a meticulous removal of the unnecessary, the frivolous, the emotionally draining distractions that tether the mind to the whims of others. The cold mind observes without immediate judgment, calculates without interference from desire, and acts without revealing the tremors of inner uncertainty. In this state, one is free to wield influence not by pleading for it, but by commanding it, silently, imperceptibly, like the slow shift of tectonic plates that eventually redefines the landscape itself. People are drawn to power, not warmth. They are captivated by those who seem untouchable, who move with the assurance of inevitability, whose intentions remain opaque, whose emotions are a locked chamber none can enter. This is why respect follows the cold, because the cold are unassailable, and unassailability demands acknowledgement whether one wishes to give it or not. Reflect on human relationships. Notice how often warmth and vulnerability invite exploitation. The generous are drained, the empathetic overextended, the sincere ridiculed. Society celebrates the gregarious, the outgoing, the pleasing, but secretly fears them the moment they demand more than trivial admiration. Warmth, untempered by detachment, becomes a liability, a weapon in the hands of the cunning, a flaw that ensures one is underestimated and ultimately ignored. In contrast, the cold are measured, deliberate, and paradoxically magnetic. People sense their reserve, interpret it as mastery, and project upon it their own awe and respect. Silence becomes louder than words. Absence becomes a presence. The mere act of withholding warmth creates an authority no argument, no display, no act of overt ambition can replicate. In this pursuit, detachment is an instrument. Observe the dynamics of power around you. The man who speaks only when his words matter. The woman whose glance commands attention without effort. The figure who does not chase approval, but lets the world pursue their recognition. These are not anomalies. They are the inevitable outcome of cold strategy, a deliberate, painstaking cultivation of self-possession and strategic distance. Every action they take is weighted, every interaction calculated, and yet it appears effortless to the outside observer, who cannot fathom the inner discipline required to master such art. To be cold is to ascend above the petty turbulence of human opinion, to stand on a platform others can never reach, and to be acknowledged not because one demands it, but because one embodies it. The process of becoming cold is not instantaneous. It requires ruthless self-awareness. Examine your own attachments, which desires weaken your resolve, which affections distract from purpose, which indulgences erode your autonomy. These must be relinquished. Emotional investment becomes currency only when it serves strategy, otherwise it is a liability. Learn to respond, not react, to observe, not entangle, to act with precision, not passion. The cold mind measures consequence with the detachment of a chess master plotting moves several turns ahead, anticipating both the weakness and the ambition in others, exploiting neither recklessly but strategically. Imagine yourself as a room of mirrors, each reflecting not your face, but the perceptions of others. The warm-hearted may gaze into these mirrors and see only opportunity for connection, validation, or empathy. The cold-hearted sees leverage. Every glance, every word, every gesture is assessed for its power to influence, to command, to compel acknowledgement. There is no room for distraction, no indulgence for sentimentality that undermines authority. Respect is not granted to those who suffer the whims of others. It is seized by those who master their own emotional dominion and impose without force a presence that cannot be ignored. And yet, there is a subtlety to coldness that must not be mistaken for cruelty. The truly respected are not feared in terror, nor hated in bitterness. They are recognized in the quiet moments when truth cannot be denied. A cold presence, wielded with intelligence, is not the absence of humanity, but the presence of power distilled. The ability to navigate the world's chaos without surrendering one's essence. To achieve this is to step into a realm few dare to enter, to understand that human behavior is a series of predictable impulses, and that mastery comes not through compliance with sentiment, but through its careful manipulation. In this darkness, insight becomes armor, and restraint becomes a weapon more formidable than aggression. Consider the lessons etched in history, where kings, generals, and thinkers achieved what others could not. Their secret was never warmth, never the longing for affection. It was control. They cultivated a coldness that shielded them from distraction, that sharpened their awareness, that compelled respect without uttering a single command. People deferred to them because they understood, intuitively, that this presence was untouchable, that this mind operated on a plane beyond ordinary understanding. Coldness, properly embraced, transforms vulnerability into strength, hesitation into anticipation, weakness into authority. Ask yourself now, are you willing to feel the initial solitude that accompanies this transformation? Are you ready to strip away the comforting illusions of empathy and charm, and to stand, unflinching, in a space where your influence is measured not by affection received, but by the unspoken acknowledgement of power? Becoming cold is a denial of life. It is an elevation above trivial concerns, a mastery of self that forces the world to recalibrate its assumptions. It is in this coldness that respect is born, not granted, not begged, but earned through presence, precision, and unassailable clarity of purpose. And so, as the world clamors for warmth, approval, and the fleeting embrace of admiration, you must ask yourself, will you continue to surrender your authority to sentiment, or will you embrace the cold, cultivate the silence, and step into a realm where respect appears naturally, as inevitable as nightfall, as inexorable as the tide? Here begins the journey into that darkness, where emotional detachment becomes a tool, where observation becomes power, where restraint becomes dominance, and where the cold mind learns that to command respect is to demand nothing and to withhold everything that does not serve the ascension of self. The moment you embrace coldness, the world begins to shift around you, subtly, imperceptibly, as though the very air recalibrates to your presence. You will notice it first in the way conversations change. The laughter that once included you now pauses when your gaze rests on the speaker. The casual chatter that once flowed freely now hesitates, constrained by an invisible gravity you have summoned. People do not consciously recognize this shift. They sense it. It is instinctual, primal. The cold command of a detached mind resonates with something buried deep in the human psyche, the acknowledgement of superiority, the recognition that one who feels nothing, who reacts only with precision, is untouchable, unassailable, and therefore worthy of deference. This is the power of coldness. It does not beg, it does not persuade, it simply exists, and in existing with such clarity, it bends perception to its will. To wield this force effectively, one must understand the mechanics of human desire, observe the weakly ambitious, the endlessly seeking, the desperate for approval. These are the people who exhaust themselves and everyone around them, who mistake attention for power, who plead for acknowledgement and never receive it in the measure they crave. You, who have chosen coldness, are above this folly. You recognize that respect is earned through restraint, not indulgence, through control, not capitulation. Every emotional outburst, every eager display of sympathy, Every concession to another's whims diminishes authority. Coldness requires patience, a deliberate withholding of reaction, a mastery of internal equilibrium that transforms each action, each silence, each glance into an instrument of influence. Consider manipulation, not as cruelty, but as art. To influence without revealing your hand is to inhabit the space of power where others are merely pieces on a board you control. The cold mind calculates each interaction with an acute awareness of psychological leverage. Words are not idle, they are ammunition. Silence is not emptiness, it is a fortress. Presence is not mere occupancy, it is an assertion of dominance. Those who fail to perceive this will continue to chase the fleeting approval of a world that values warmth over wisdom, chatter over strategy, sentiment over foresight. But you, who are learning to become cold, have already stepped beyond the need for affirmation. You are no longer a player in their drama, you are the observer, the unseen hand, the quiet architect shaping outcomes without surrendering your autonomy. Emotions are the currency of weakness, and the cold understand this implicitly. Anger, fear, compassion, desire, all can be exploited in others, but they must be restrained in yourself. Every reaction you suppress, every attachment you detach from, every impulse you neutralize strengthens your position. Watch how people around you are enslaved by their feelings, how their decisions twist and fracture under the weight of uncontrolled sentiment. Then watch yourself, unmoved, calculating, discerning, choosing exactly when and how to deploy influence. There is an elegance in this detachment, a surgical precision that transforms perception into authority. In the quiet spaces of restraint, you discover the true mechanics of respect. It is not a gift, it is an acknowledgement of competence, control, and inevitability. Coldness also sharpens perception. You begin to notice the subtleties others overlook, the micro-expressions that betray intent, the hesitations that reveal fear, the fleeting glances that hide ambition. You learn to read the unspoken, to interpret the gaps between words, to discern the patterns that govern human behavior. With this understanding, you can manipulate outcomes not through overt force, but through anticipation, guiding others to act as you desire while they believe themselves autonomous. This is not deception for its own sake. It is strategy, the orchestration of human behavior with the calm precision of a conductor commanding an orchestra of impulses, desires, and vulnerabilities. Every environment contains weak points. Every network of people contains friction, and every system of influence contains loopholes. The cold mind identifies these and exploits them quietly, invisibly, ensuring that every move strengthens position without unnecessary exposure. Observe, calculate, intervene minimally, and watch the consequences unfold naturally. There is no need for ostentation. The cold know that subtlety is infinitely more powerful than display. By the time others perceive manipulation, the outcome is already inevitable, and respect has been won without a word. This is mastery, to act decisively, yet appear passive, to control, yet remain unseen, to command, yet never beg recognition. The journey into coldness is also a journey into isolation. Those who cannot comprehend detachment will mistake it for arrogance or cruelty. Some will resent you. Some will attempt to draw you back into the chaos of ordinary sentiment. Let them. Let their misunderstanding strengthen your resolve. Coldness is forged in solitude, because power, true power, cannot coexist with dependence on others for emotional sustenance. The cold mind thrives in the vacuum of distraction, finding freedom in the absence of interference, clarity in the absence of noise, strength in the absence of need. And paradoxically, it is in this isolation that others begin to seek your presence, to crave your approval, to recognize your authority. For when one is unbent, unyielding, and unswayed by the trivialities of human attachment, they are inevitably seen as superior. History whispers countless examples of this truth. Those who rise above the torrent of sentiment are not the most empathetic, nor the most loved. They are the most respected. Their coldness, carefully cultivated, shields them from error, enhances their judgment, and commands acknowledgement. Leaders who master emotional detachment, generals who act with precision, thinkers who withhold the distraction of approval, they leave a legacy not of warmth, but of inevitability. People defer to them, not because they are pleasant, but because they are untouchable, predictable in their mastery, and ruthless in their clarity of purpose. The cold, above all, Understand that respect is not an outcome of affection. It is an outcome of dominance achieved without aggression, of influence exerted without surrender, of presence imposed without force. And yet, there is an artistry to coldness that tempers its raw power. It is not about cruelty, but about calibration. One must know when to release warmth strategically, when to feign vulnerability, when to allow minor concessions that deepen the perception of control. Every action, no matter how subtle, becomes a brushstroke on the canvas of influence. The cold are painters of perception, sculptors of outcome, engineers of human behavior. They understand that the world is a theater of impulses and expectations, and that those who appear unassailable will always draw the attention, compliance, and ultimately respect of others. Becoming cold is also an exercise in endurance. It demands that you suppress immediate gratification, that you delay response to provocation, that you resist the temptation to over-explain, over-justify, or overindulge in sentiment. The reward is not instant, but cumulative, an inexorable accrual of authority, recognition, and self-possession. Those who attempt warmth in the hope of immediate acknowledgement find themselves exhausted, diminished, and overlooked. You, who have learned the power of coldness, operate on a different timeline, measured, deliberate, and unshakable. The world may try to rush you, to provoke reaction, to elicit compliance, but you remain unmoved, and in this stillness, respect takes root, deep and permanent. Every encounter, every negotiation, every interaction becomes an arena in which coldness exerts quiet control. You listen without interrupting, observe without responding impulsively, and interject only when the timing magnifies the effect of your words. Your silence carries weight, your approval becomes rare and therefore valuable, your disinterest becomes a signal of discernment. People crave the acknowledgement of the untouchable because it validates their own place in the hierarchy you have implicitly defined. In this way, coldness transforms not only perception but behavior, subtly bending the actions of others to reinforce your authority, while leaving them unaware that they are being due. I did, and as you continue to refine this discipline, you notice a profound shift within yourself. Emotional turbulence no longer dictates choices. The petty dramas of jealousy, rivalry, and opinion lose significance. You see the landscape of human behavior with unprecedented clarity. The predictable fears, the hidden ambitions, the vulnerabilities that once identified become instruments of influence rather than sources of distraction. The cold mind thrives in this understanding, orchestrating events with precision, exercising influence with minimal effort, and earning respect without compromise. This is the path of those who rise above mediocrity, who refuse the entanglements of sentiment, who understand that the power of coldness is not absence of feeling but mastery over it. The cold do not live at the mercy of others. They move through the world with purpose, clarity, and inevitability. They are the unseen architects of outcomes, the quiet forces that shape perception and command obedience. Respect follows them, not because they seek it, but because the very act of being cold positions them above the chaos of ordinary human expectation. So observe yourself. Examine the impulses you cling to, the attachments that drain your energy, the reactions that betray your authority. Begin the deliberate cultivation of detachment. Embrace the quiet power of restraint, the subtle authority of observation, the magnetic inevitability of presence. In the absence of warmth, the world begins to bend to your clarity. In the quiet of coldness, respect appears, undeniable, inexorable, and lasting. You ever wondered why some people seem to bend the world to their will, while others stumble endlessly, desperate for recognition and validation that never arrives? It is not chance, nor luck, nor a measure of virtue. It is a question of control over self, over perception, and over mechanisms that drive human behavior. To wield influence, to command respect, to dominate without overt violence, one must inhabit the realm of the cold, where detachment becomes a weapon, and observation becomes insight. Those who fail to grasp this remain bound by the whims of sentiment, trapped in a cycle of expectation and disappointment, while the cold orchestrate outcomes with a precision that is invisible, yet undeniable. Coldness is not merely the absence of warmth, it is the presence of strategic intent. Consider the subtle manipulations that govern everyday life: the colleague who understates, their brilliance only to be sought after for guidance, the friend who withholds judgment yet shapes decisions through carefully chosen words, the leader who reveals nothing yet sees all. These are the manifestations of cold mastery, the silent assertion of dominance over perception. When one moves with this deliberate restraint, every action, no matter how small, carries consequence. Silence becomes louder than argument, absence more commanding than presence. People defer to those who appear unshakable, who act with inevitability, who reveal nothing that can be exploited. Coldness, in essence, is the cultivation of untouchability, and untouchability is the foundation of respect. Manipulation, in the hands of the cold, is not a crude tool but an art form. Observe those around you, their desires, their fears, the inconsistencies in their speech, the contradictions in their actions. Everything is a clue, a potential lever, a pathway to influence. The cold mind understands that humans are predictable in their unpredictability, guided by impulses they fail to control, motivated by needs they deny, driven by pride, envy, and fear. By studying these impulses, by anticipating reactions before they manifest, one can shape outcomes without confrontation, orchestrate behavior, or without coercion, and establish authority without exposure. It is subtle, surgical, and devastatingly effective. Every word you speak must carry weight, but no word should be wasted. Every glance must hint at understanding, but never betray intention. Every gesture must communicate control, but never reveal vulnerability. The cold do not rush to fill silence. They use it as a canvas on which others project their assumptions, desires, and fears. In doing so, they command attention without demanding it, influence outcomes without appearing to interfere, and cultivate respect without overt assertion. The human mind instinctively responds to those who appear capable, unflinching, and unyielding, perceiving them as anchors in a turbulent world. Coldness magnifies this perception, converting observation into authority and restraint into dominance. Consider ambition, the driving force of all human behavior. Most pursue it through noise, through display, through desperate attempts at approval. They chase accolades, recognition, and the fleeting warmth of admiration. The cold, however, pursue ambition through strategy, through foresight, through deliberate, unobserved movements that reshape the environment to their favor. They understand that to act impulsively is to surrender leverage, that to reveal desire is to invite opposition, that to expose weakness is to relinquish control. Coldness, therefore, is not the abandonment of ambition, it is the refinement of its pursuit, the mastery of timing, the orchestration of cause and effect in a world blind to subtlety yet enslaved by influence. In relationships, coldness transforms dynamics. Observe how attachment creates vulnerability. Those who give freely of warmth, attention, or approval expose themselves to manipulation, disappointment, and betrayal. The cold guard these resources jealously, revealing them only when straight. GIC advantage dictates, and in doing so create value through scarcity. People crave what is withheld. They seek the nod of approval from those who remain distant. They yearn for guidance from those who conceal intent. They respect those who act with authority without solicitation. The manipulation is invisible, ethical ambiguity irrelevant. The effect is absolute. Control emerges not from dominance imposed, but from influence exerted with precision. Fear and respect are intertwined. Few understand that fear need not be terror. It can be subtle, psychological, the kind that inspires compliance without rebellion. A measured detachment, an unshakable demeanor, a refusal to be provoked. These create an aura of inevitability that is more potent than intimidation. People internalize the power they perceive, shaping their behavior accordingly. They defer, comply, and ultimately respect, without ever recognizing the architect of their submission. This is the silent majesty of coldness, the quiet mastery of influence that operates beneath the awareness of the uninitiated. Every interaction is an opportunity to exert this power. When someone attempts to provoke, respond with neutrality. When others seek guidance, offer insight sparingly. When emotions run high, maintain composure. These are not mere tactics, they are principles of existence in a state of strategic detachment. Over time, this discipline cultivates a perception of infallibility. People begin to measure themselves against your standard of control, recognizing in your calm, measured actions a competence they cannot match, a self-possession they cannot replicate. In this recognition lies respect. It is not solicited, it is inevitable. Consider the theater of deception. The cold understand that truth is a tool to be wielded, not a moral imperative to be followed blindly. By selectively revealing facts, by framing narratives with precision, by timing disclosure to maximize effect, one can manipulate perception without resorting to overt falsehood. The objective is never dishonesty for its own sake, but the orchestration of outcomes. Every omission, every subtle shift of emphasis, every carefully placed word contributes to a structure of influence, in which respect is both shield and reward. Those who pursue truth indiscriminately often weaken their position, while the cold wield it strategically, bending reality to align with their objectives. Power is a language, and coldness is its most eloquent dialect. It communicates certainty without arrogance, influence without aggression, and authority without appeal. Observe the reactions of those around you, the hesitation before they speak, the subtle deference in posture, the careful weighting of their words. All of this is unconscious acknowledgement of dominance, recognition of competence, and respect for control. By mastering coldness, you manipulate the very perception of power, ensuring that respect follows not because it is demanded, but because it is unavoidable. Every decision must be measured against consequence, every action weighed against long-term impact, every attachment evaluated for its utility. Emotional indulgence clouds judgment, undermines strategy, and exposes vulnerability. The cold suppress these indulgences, cultivating a state of deliberate equilibrium in which thought, action, and influence are synchronized. This synchronization is invisible to the observer, but it dictates outcomes with unerring precision. People respect not the warmth you withhold, but the consistency, the foresight, and the inevitability that your coldness projects. As you deepen this discipline, you notice the transformation within yourself. Chaos no longer unsettles you, provocation no longer distracts you, desire no longer dictates you. You operate on a plane above ordinary emotion, capable of navigating social, professional, and political landscapes with clarity, efficiency, and dominance. The cold mind is immune to the illusions that ensnare others: flattery, jealousy, popularity, sentimentality. These are tools to be recognized and manipulated, not traps to be avoided blindly. Your detachment becomes your power, your foresight becomes your leverage, and your presence becomes an unspoken command that shapes perception and action alike. History teaches that those who master this art rise while others falter. They do not rely on popularity, charm, or empathy. They rely on strategy, calculation, and self-possession. Generals, statesmen, and thinkers who wielded influence effectively did so through disciplined coldness, by withholding reaction, by observing relentlessly, by acting only when the timing ensured maximum effect. The world bends to those who command presence without supplication, who orchestrate outcomes without overt interference, who demand nothing yet are acknowledged by all. Respect follows them naturally, inevitably, as a consequence of mastery. And as you embrace coldness, remember that it is not cruelty but clarity, not absence of feeling but refinement of influence, not isolation but ascension. The world may continue its chaos, the weak may continue to plead for attention, and the emotional may continue to exhaust themselves in futile displays. You, who are learning to become cold, stand apart, observing, calculating, influencing, and commanding silently. Respect appears not because you seek it, but because the cold mind renders it unavoidable. In every glance, every gesture, every measured word, the world recognizes what it cannot challenge, what it cannot manipulate, and what it cannot ignore: your mastery, your presence, your inevitability. Now imagine the subtle currents, hat, govern every interaction you engage in. They are invisible to those who operate with warmth, distracted by the clamor of feelings, the pull of attachment, the desperate need for approval. But the cold perceive them with crystalline clarity. Every glance, every hesitation, every slight shift in tone or posture conveys information, signals of fear, envy, ambition, and desire. To the untrained, these are inconsequential. To the cold, they are maps, charts, and tools. The ability to interpret these cues, to act upon them without revealing your understanding, is the foundation of influence, the architecture of dominance, and the pathway to respect. Coldness sharpens perception until every weakness in the human psyche becomes a lever for strategic advantage, every impulsive reaction a gateway to control. Observe the mechanics of decision-making in others. Those bound by sentiment act predictably. They seek approval, avoid confrontation, overvalue comfort, and undervalue consequence. They react rather than calculate, and in their reaction lies opportunity. The cold mind waits, analyzes, and determines the precise moment when intervention will yield maximal effect. In this precision, restraint becomes a weapon, and detachment a form of armor. To act too early is to waste leverage. To act too late is to surrender advantage. The mastery of timing is not instinctive, it is cultivated. Every delay, every measured silence, every refusal to respond impulsively accumulates power quietly, imperceptibly, until the world bends to the presence of one who is always several moves ahead. Manipulation is not an act of malevolence, it is the discipline of shaping human behavior to align with one's objectives. Observe how the weakly ambitious overextend themselves, how the emotionally dependent overcommit, how the eager for approval exhaust their influence while gaining nothing in return. The cold, however, exploit these dynamics surgically. A word here, a silence there, a subtle gesture of acknowledgement, and the course of events shifts. The key is invisibility. The target must remain unaware that they are being guided. Influence is most effective when it appears spontaneous, when the other believes themselves to be in control, and yet every action they take furthers your agenda. This is the artistry of cold strategy, absolute control masked by the illusion of autonomy. Power is perception, and coldness is the sculptor of that perception. Observe how people defer to the unattainable, how they interpret detachment as mastery, how they project authority onto those who remain unreadable. By maintaining distance, by withholding immediate reaction, by controlling visibility, the cold manipulate belief itself. Respect is not merely earned, it is engineered. It emerges not from fear alone, nor from charisma alone, but from the deliberate orchestration of perception, from the strategic modulation of presence, from the disciplined mastery of influence over self and others alike. In human networks, influence often appears to arise spontaneously, yet it is always anchored in understanding. The cold analyze relationships as a strategist evaluates a battlefield. Where are the weak points? Who is motivated by fear? Who is blinded by pride? And who can be turned into an instrument of advantage? Every connection, every alliance, every conflict is an opportunity to consolidate authority. The emotionally warm, distracted by empathy and attachment, miss these opportunities. They react rather than orchestrate, concede rather than control, and over time they are relegated to the background while the cold occupy the center stage of attention and power. Consider the role of subtle intimidation. It is not aggression, it is a presence that signals inevitability. People instinctively recognize those who are unmoved by chaos, impervious to provocation, and unshaken by opposition. This quiet authority creates compliance without confrontation. It instills respect without command. By cultivating calm, precision, and detachment, the cold engineer an aura of dominance that others cannot challenge. The effect is cumulative. Each interaction, each observation, each strategic pause reinforces the perception of control, until the world bends naturally to one who has mastered the art of restraint. Emotional restraint is the crucible in which this mastery is forged. Anger, desire, fear, and affection are forces that disrupt judgment and invite exploitation. The cold discipline themselves to suppress these impulses, transforming emotion into insight, reaction into strategy, and instinct into advantage. Where others see a slight, a provocation, or an insult, the cold discern opportunity to assert authority, to manipulate behavior, or to recalibrate perception. This is not callousness, it is clarity. It is the conscious choice to wield power with precision rather than to surrender to the chaos of sentiment. Every interaction with others becomes a game of influence. Observe how people seek validation, how they adjust behavior to curry favor, how they reveal weakness unintentionally. The cold exploit this by offering praise selectively, by revealing acknowledgement sparingly, by allowing presence to communicate more than words ever could. People respond instinctively to scarcity of attention, to the deliberate withholding of approval, and to the perception of authority that refuses to bend to sentiment. In this subtle orchestration, respect is not requested. It is compelled, inevitable, and enduring. Strategic deception is another instrument of mastery. The cold understand that truth is malleable when wielded intentionally. By framing information, timing disclosure, and emphasizing selected facts, one can shape perception without overt falsity. The objective is not dishonesty, but control, to guide interpretation, to direct attention, and to create outcomes favorable to one's goals. Subtlety is paramount. The most effective influence is that which leaves the other believing they acted independently, yet every step was guided by unseen calculation. In this way, coldness transforms perception into reality, and reality into a reflection of strategic intent. Respect and fear, though distinct, are intertwined in the practice of cold mastery. Fear need not terrify, it can be quiet, a sense of inevitability that compels compliance. Observe those around you, hesitation in speech, self-conscious posture, careful choice of words. These are markers of internalized acknowledgement of authority, the unconscious recognition of presence and capability. By remaining detached, precise, and unflinching, the cold amplify this effect. People internalize the command they perceive, and respect follows naturally. It does not require demand, coercion, or display, only the disciplined cultivation of presence. Isolation becomes a crucible of power. As you refine coldness, warmth and distraction lose appeal. Those who cannot comprehend detachment may resent or challenge you, but their confusion reinforces your authority. Solitude is not loneliness, it is freedom from interference, a space in which observation, calculation, and strategic preparation can flourish. In this vacuum, clarity emerges, and your capacity to influence expands. By mastering solitude, you consolidate control, sharpen perception, and cultivate the aura of inevitability that commands respect. Consider historical figures who achieve dominance not through warmth or charm, but through calculation, detachment, and precision. Generals who withheld anger to strike decisive. Statesmen who concealed intent to manipulate alliances. Thinkers who observed relentlessly to shape outcomes. All understood that cold mastery trumps emotional indulgence. Their respect was not solicited, it was acknowledged. Their authority not displayed, it was inferred. The world, in its subtle recognition of power, bends to those who inhabit this realm of detachment, foresight, and control. And within yourself, as you adopt these principles, a transformation occurs. Chaos no longer unsettles you. Provocation no longer distracts you. Desire no longer dictates your choices. You operate on a plane above ordinary emotion, capable of navigating complex social, political, and psychological landscapes with precision. Every interaction becomes a strategic opportunity, every observation a source of leverage, every decision a reinforcement of authority. The cold mind thrives here, orchestrating influence invisibly, cultivating respect inevitably, and commanding recognition without overt assertion. The mastery of coldness is the mastery of influence, perception, and consequence. It requires discipline, observation, and patience. It demands that you withhold reaction, delay gratification, and cultivate presence as a force in itself. It teaches that the world responds not to warmth or entreaty, but to clarity, precision, and inevitability. Those who embrace this path are acknowledged, respected, and deferred to not because they demand it, but because their mastery renders acknowledgement unavoidable. And so, as the emotional and the warm flounder in the turbulence of human expectation, you, who are learning the art of coldness, rise. You rise above distraction, above sentiment, above the chaos that consumes those unprepared to wield detachment. Respect follows, silently yet persistently, as the natural consequence of a mind that acts without fear, observes without attack, and commands without effort. In this realm, you are untouchable, unshakable, and inevitable. The cold are never ignored. They are always accounted for, always deferred to, and always remembered. The deeper you move into coldness, the more clearly you see that power is not seized in moments of drama, but accumulated in stretches of stillness that others mistake for inactivity. While they rush, react, and expose themselves through noise and urgency, you remain composed, watching patterns repeat themselves with almost mechanical predictability. Human beings believe themselves complex, unique, driven by noble intention, yet under pressure they revert to the same impulses again and again. Fear makes them reckless, desire makes them blind, pride makes them predictable. And it is here, in this repetition of weakness, that the cold mind finds its greatest advantage. Those who live warmly seek emotional resolution. They crave closure, reassurance, immediate response. They cannot tolerate uncertainty. So they rush to fill silence with words, to fill distance with explanation, to fill tension with concession. The cold do the opposite. They allow uncertainty to linger. They let silence stretch. They let others sit in the discomfort of not knowing where they stand. This discomfort is not accidental, it is a pressure. Under pressure, people reveal themselves. They speak too much. They promise too much. They commit too early, and every premature movement exposes leverage. Control is rarely about what you do. It is about what you allow others to do to themselves while you remain still. When someone believes they are losing your attention, they will attempt to regain it. When they believe they have disappointed you, they will attempt to repair it. When they believe your approval is scarce, they will compete for it. This is not cruelty. This is human nature responding to perceive. Hierarchy. Coldness clarifies hierarchy without announcing it. It establishes dominance without conflict. It creates gravity. Watch how quickly people adjust their behavior around those who do not chase them. The cold never pursue validation. They never over-explain their intentions. They never rush to reassure. This restraint communicates something far more powerful than affection ever could: self-sufficiency. And self-sufficiency terrifies and fascinates the human mind at the same time. It signals that you are not dependent, that you cannot be easily manipulated, that you have options. Respect emerges instinctively in response to this signal. In negotiation, warmth concedes before it is required. Coldness waits. Others reveal urgency through tone, pacing, and repetition. They expose fear of loss without realizing it. The cold notice this and remain unmoved. Time becomes a weapon. Delay becomes leverage. The longer you can withstand discomfort, the more power shifts in your favor. Most people break before you do. They compromise prematurely. They justify themselves unnecessarily. They give away ground simply to relieve internal tension. You do not. And when the moment comes to speak, your words land with disproportionate force because they are rare, measured, and final. Emotional distance also shields you from manipulation. Flattery loses its effect. Provocation fails. Guilt finds no entry point. You are not reactive, so you cannot be steered. Those who attempt to control through emotion find themselves disarmed, confused, and exposed. They escalate, reveal frustration, or retreat entirely. In every scenario, you gain information while giving none. This asymmetry is power. As coldness deepens, people begin to narrate stories about you in your absence. They speculate, they project, they fill the vacuum of your silence with their own interpretations. Some will call you intimidating. Others will call you mysterious. Some will accuse you of arrogance. These labels are irrelevant. What matters is that you occupy mental space without effort. You become a reference point. And in human hierarchy, those who are talked about but never fully understood are often placed above those who are constantly available and easily read. Availability is mistaken for kindness, but it breeds contempt. Scarcity breeds value. The cold understand this at every level. Your time becomes limited. Your attention becomes selective. Your approval becomes rare. Each boundary reinforces your position. People learn, unconsciously, that access to you must be earned, not assumed. This recalibration changes the entire dynamic. You are no longer reacting to the world. The world begins adjusting to you. There is a moment in this transformation when you realize something unsettling. Respect often arrives when empathy retreats. Not because empathy is weakness, but because unguarded empathy dissolves boundaries. When people sense they can always reach you emotionally, they stop respecting your limits. Coldness restores those limits. It teaches others where they end and you begin. And boundaries, once established, are rarely challenged by those who recognize strength. Power also grows in your ability to walk away without explanation. The warm feel compelled to justify departure, to soften exits, to preserve emotional harmony. The cold simply leave. This act alone sends a profound signal. You are not trapped. You are not dependent. You are not afraid of loss. Those left behind feel the imbalance immediately. They reassess, they regret, they remember, and in remembering, respect forms. Observe how leaders who command loyalty are rarely the most emotionally expressive. They are steady, predictable in their restraint, unmoved by panic. In moments of crisis, warmth sprees. Anxiety. Coldness spreads certainty. People look to whoever remains calm when others fracture. They defer to whoever appears capable of enduring pressure without collapse. This is not learned through charisma, it is earned through discipline. Coldness also grants you immunity from the need to be understood. The desire to be understood is a vulnerability. It invites misinterpretation, debate, and resistance. The cold accept misunderstanding as a byproduct of authority. They do not correct every false assumption. They allow ambiguity to protect them. Ambiguity keeps opponents cautious and allies attentive. When people are unsure of your limits, they are less likely to test them. As your detachment solidifies, you begin to see the final illusion dissolve, the belief that respect comes from being liked. Likability is fleeting. It depends on mood, context, convenience. Respect is structural. It endures beyond emotion. It survives disagreement. It persists in absence. And it is built on one foundation above all others: self-command. You command yourself first, your impulses, your reactions, your attachments. Only then do others follow suit. Only then does the environment rearrange itself around your presence. Coldness is the visible manifestation of this internal order. It is not emptiness, it is density, it is compressed intention. It is the silence before action that cannot be stopped once initiated. Those who remain warm will continue to confuse motion with progress, emotion with influence, and attention with power. They will exhaust themselves explaining, pleasing, chasing, repairing. You will not. You will conserve energy. You will choose moments. You will act when the outcome is already secured. And in this restraint, you will notice the final shift. People no longer challenge you casually. They measure themselves before approaching. They prepare before speaking. They hesitate before opposing. This hesitation is not fear in its crude form. It is recognition. Recognition of someone who does not need to dominate loudly because dominance is already established. Someone who does not threaten because threat is unnecessary. Someone who does not seek respect because respect has already appeared. Coldness has done its work. Now, at the apex of this transformation, you stand at the threshold of a reality few dare to inhabit. You are no longer tethered to the cravings of others, no longer swayed by fleeting admiration, no longer trapped in the endless cycle of approval and disappointment. You have learned to act with deliberation, to observe without interference, to withhold without hesitation, to move unseen yet command unseen influence. In this space, respect is no longer a gift or an uncertain hope. It is inevitable. People will recognize your authority not because you demand it, but because you have forged a presence that cannot be ignored, a mind that cannot be bent, a will that cannot be swayed. Every glance you cast, every word you speak, every silence you maintain becomes a tool of power. Those who attempt to manipulate you will find themselves misled by your calm, guided unknowingly by your strategy, influenced without awareness. Every attempt to provoke, to sway, to distract will falter, for the cold mind does not act on impulse but on calculation. You have become the observer, the orchestrator, the silent force that shapes outcomes while others remain oblivious. Your actions are precise, your timing impeccable, your presence undeniable. In this mastery, respect emerges naturally, as an acknowledgement of competence, inevitability, and dominance. Look back now at the world you once knew, the chaos of sentiment, the turbulence of attachment, the endless demands of connection. Those who remain warm will continue to flounder, desperate for validation, exhausted by their own need for recognition. They will plead, explain, charm, and compromise, while you stand apart, unmoved and calculating. Observe the patterns that others fail to perceive, the impulses that drive their choices, the weaknesses that reveal themselves through haste and emotion. In this clarity, you discover freedom, the freedom to act without interference, to anticipate without distraction, to command without contention. Coldness is the lens through which power becomes visible, influence becomes inevitable, and respect becomes unavoidable. And yet, the ultimate mastery of coldness is not merely in the accumulation of authority, but in the understanding of human behavior itself. You perceive the desires that manipulate, the fears that constrain, the pride that blinds. You see the patterns of expectation and reaction, of flattery and deceit, of loyalty and betrayal. Armed with this knowledge, you move as both participant and observer, shaping events without exposure, guiding decisions without coercion, orchestrating outcomes with precision that appears effortless. To the uninitiated, it is magic. To the cold, it is the natural consequence of discipline, foresight, and emotional sovereignty. Now, imagine the psychological terrain you have conquered, where once you were moved by fear, by hope, by longing, you now operate from clarity. Where once you were manipulated by the impulses of others, you now manipulate subtly, invisibly, inevitably. Every action you take has consequence. Every gesture carries weight. Every decision reflects strategy. Your presence becomes a measure of influence, your attention a currency of value, your restraint a signal of authority. People instinctively defer, consciously or not, because they recognize what they cannot challenge, control, or understand. You have become untouchable, unshakable, and inevitable. Do not mistake this for cruelty. The cold are not heartless, they are precise. They do not act without purpose, they act with intention. They do not yield to sentiment, they yield to strategy. And in this refinement, you gain a freedom that warmth can never provide. Freedom from distraction, freedom from manipulation, freedom from the expectation of others. You are no longer a reactive participant in life's drama. You are the orchestrator, the unseen force, the axis around which perception and action revolve. Respect does not need to be asked for. It arises naturally in response to the mastery you now embody. At this juncture, you must confront one final truth. To become cold is to embrace responsibility. The clarity, the detachment, the influence you wield is not without consequence. Every decision carries weight. Every silence sends signals. Every act of restraint shapes perception. The cold mind must act deliberately, consistently, and consciously. To falter is to lose leverage. To overindulge is to erode authority. To hesitate without purpose is to invite encroachment. Vigilance becomes a permanent state. Observation a continuous practice. Calculation an unbroken discipline. Yet in this rigor lies the ultimate reward: unassailable respect, inevitable influence, and the freedom to navigate the world on your own terms. Now, stand fully within this power. Observe the patterns of weakness around you. Recognize the impulses that others cannot control. Harness silence, delay, and absence as instruments of influence. Speak when it carries consequence, act when it secures outcome, and withhold always what is unnecessary, fleeting, or distracting. Let presence alone dictate the terms of engagement. Let restraint become your most formidable weapon. Let coldness define your strategy and guide your decisions. The world responds not to warmth, but to inevitability, not to plea, but to presence, not to effort, but to mastery. And in this moment, commit to the transformation fully. No longer be swayed by the expectations of the emotionally needy. No longer chase approval. No longer dilute your authority with indulgence. Walk through the world with deliberate intent, calculate with unshakable clarity, observe with unrelenting focus, and act only when necessary to consolidate your influence. People will respect you. They will seek your guidance. They will hesitate before opposing. They will unconsciously recalibrate their own behavior in response to your mastery. This is the power of coldness. Finally, understand this. Respect is not granted to the warm, the pleasing, or the generous. It is earned by those who command themselves first, by those who withhold indulgence, by those who act with intention while remaining untouchable. It is won by those who embrace silence, calculate consequence, and move through life with inevitability. And now it is yours to claim. Stand, fully aware of your power. Step into every interaction as a master of influence. Let coldness sharpen your mind, fortify your will, and define your presence. From this day forward, you will no longer plead for acknowledgement, no longer fear rejection, no longer seek to be liked. You will act with precision, observe with clarity, and command without apology. Respect appears when warmth fades. Master the cold, and the world bends to your will.